Okay, it's time for chapter 5. Okay, so it says find the exit off the failure freeway. The moment a question comes to your mind, see yourself mentally taking hold of it and disposing of it. In that moment is your choice made. Thus, you learn to take the path to the right. Thus, you learn to become the decider and not the vacillator. Thus, you build character. Business professors Gary Hamel and C.K. Prahalad have written about an experiment that was conducted with a group of monkeys. It is a vivid story of failure. 4 monkeys were placed in a room that had a tall pole in the center. Suspended from the top of that pole was a bunch of bananas. One of the hungry monkeys started climbing the pole to get something to eat, but just as he reached out to grab a banana, he was doused with a torrent of cold water. Squealing, he scampered down the pole and abandoned his attempt to feed himself. Each monkey made a similar attempt, and each one was drenched with cold water. After making several attempts, they finally gave up. Then researchers removed one of the monkeys from the room and replaced him with a new monkey. As the newcomer began to climb the pole, the other 3 grabbed him and pulled him down to the ground. After trying to climb the pole several times and being dragged down by the others, he finally gave up and never attempted to climb the pole again. The researchers replaced the original monkeys one by one, and each time a new monkey was brought in, he would be dragged down by the others before he could reach the bananas. In time, the room was filled with monkeys who had never received a cold shower. None of them would climb this pole, but none of them knew why. That's interesting. Don't let failure make a monkey out of you. Unfortunately, people who have gotten used to failure can be a lot like those monkeys. They make the same mistakes again and again, yet they're never quite sure why. And as a result, they never seem to get off what I call the failure freeway. The old saying is true. If you always do what you've always done, then you will always get what you've always gotten. Let's face it, people are prone to ruts, and anyone who has been conditioned to think failure is his fate has an especially hard time exiting the failure freeway. If you feel like one of the monkeys in the experiment, meaning you can't seem to achieve what you desire but you don't know why, then take a look at the pattern many failure prone people fall into and the ultimate solution. It all starts with a mess up. What starts people down the failure freeway is a common mistake, failure, or mess up. But people who stay on the failure freeway don't think that it's their fault. They are similar to the drivers who wrote the following explanations for the auto accidents in which they were involved. As I reached an intersection, a hedge sprang up, obscuring my vision. An invisible car came out of nowhere, struck my car, and vanished. The telephone pole was approaching fast. I attempted to swerve out of its path when it struck my front end. The indirect cause of this accident was a little guy in a small car with a big mouth. I had been driving my car for 4 years when I fell asleep at the wheel and had an accident. I was on the way to the doctor's with rear end trouble when my universal joint gave way, causing me to have an accident. To avoid hitting the bumper of the car in front, I struck the pedestrian. I was coming home, pulled into the wrong driveway, and hit a tree I did not have. I was just keeping up with the cars behind me. The pedestrian had no idea which direction to run, so I ran over him. The guy was all over the road, and I had to swerve a number of times before hitting him. I pulled away at the side of the road, glanced at my mother in law, and headed over the embankment. Many people on the failure freeway make mistakes but refuse to admit them. They see every obstacle or error as somebody else's fault, and as a result, they generally respond in one or more of the following ways. Blow up. One reaction to failure that keeps people driving on the failure freeway is anger. You've probably seen it. People make a minor mistake and angrily overreact to it, taking out their frustration on themselves or others around them. Unchecked anger makes a small problem bigger. 19th century English author Charles Buxton summed it up. Bad temper is its own scourge. Few things are more bitter than to feel bitter. A man's venom poisons himself more than his victim. If a person doesn't govern his temper, it will govern him. Cover up. It's in the nature of people to try to cover up their mistakes. That tendency is as old as Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and it's usually just as successful for us today as it was for them. I heard a joke about a young Navy pilot on maneuvers that shows how people often react to their mistakes. Prior to takeoff, the commanding admiral had ordered absolute radio silence from everyone engaged in the exercise. But one pilot mistakenly turned on his radio and was heard to mutter, "Boy, am I fouled up." The admiral grabbed the mic from a radio operator and said, "Will the pilot who broke the radio silence identify himself immediately?" There was a long silence, and then a voice was heard over the radio. "I may be fouled up, but I'm not that fouled up." People's desire to make sure others don't see their mistakes isn't always so humorous. For example, take the case of Nicholas Leeson. In 1995, the 28-year-old worked for the British bank Barings. He controlled huge amounts of money for the organization, which he tried to increase through what's been called casino-style investing. When Leeson's dealings resulted in huge losses, he covered them up and made even riskier trades to try to recoup his losses. Analysts said it was like betting double or nothing in a gambling game. The problem was that Leeson kept coming up with nothing, creating bigger and bigger losses. Ultimately, his actions cost Barings $1.3 billion. He single-handedly put one of the oldest banks in the world out of business. H. Stanley Dudd said, "Don't waste energy trying to cover up failure. Learn from your failures and go on to the next challenge. It's okay to fail. If you're not failing, you're not growing." Anyone who wants to get off the failure freeway needs to fess up rather than cover up. Speed up. Particularly stubborn people sometimes try to leave their troubles behind by working harder and faster, but without changing their direction. They're like the person trying to get the square peg in the round hole who first tries to place the peg in the hole, then tries to shove it in, then takes a hammer and tries to pound it in. They're working hard but getting nowhere. William Dean Singleton, co-owner of Media News Group, Inc., addresses this tendency. Too many people, when they make a mistake, just keep stubbornly plowing ahead and end up repeating the same mistakes. I believe in the motto, try and try again. But the way I read it, it says try, then stop and think, then try again. I like that. Back up. Have you ever been talking with someone who made a thoughtless remark during a conversation, and as soon as he said it, you could tell he knew he had made a mistake? Yet when you called him on it, he refused to admit it. No matter what you said, he kept backing up and trying to justify the remark, which made him look sillier and sillier. That's what people who back up do. And if they make a habit of it, they get stuck on the failure freeway. When my wife Margaret and I were raising our children, Elizabeth and Joel Porter, both of whom are now married, we found. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm like, what? Okay, so their children are Elizabeth and Joel Porter. We found that our son had a mind and will of his own. When he did something wrong, his first move was to lie. Then he'd back up and try to cover it up. I can still picture his offended expression as he emphatically denied having eaten the chocolate candy, with his 9-year-old face smeared with chocolate. Margaret and I worked very hard to break him of that inclination. General Peyton C. March perceived. Any man worth his salt will stick up for what he believes right, but it takes a slightly bigger man to acknowledge instantly and without reservation that he is in error. I'm relieved that today my boy Joel is a man, and when he's wrong, he admits it. And that's good because nobody can exit off the failure freeway if he keeps backing up. Give up. If you stay on the failure freeway long enough, you eventually slow up. It's similar to what happens on the Interstate 285 loop around my hometown of Atlanta at rush hour, gridlock. And that's when a lot of people simply give up. Personal growth expert Paul J. Meyer says 90% of all those who fail are not actually defeated, they simply quit. But to fail forward, you've got to wake up. There's really only one solution to the gridlock on the failure freeway, and that's to wake up and find the exit. To leave the road of continual failure, a person must first utter the 3 most difficult words to say: I was wrong. He has to open his eyes, admit his mistakes, and accept complete responsibility for his current wrong actions and attitudes. Every failure you experience is a fork in the road. It's an opportunity to take the right action, learn from your mistakes, and begin again. Leadership expert Peter Drucker says, The better a man is, the more mistakes he will make, for the more new things he will try. I would never promote to a top level job a man who is not making mistakes. Otherwise, he is sure to be mediocre. Mistakes really do pave the road to achievement. Here is an acrostic I created to help me keep mistakes in perspective. Mistakes are messages that give us feedback about life, interruptions, so it's spelling mistakes. Interruptions that should cause us to reflect and think. S is for signposts that direct us to the right path. T, tests that push us toward greater maturity. A, awakenings that keep us in the game sorry. A is for awakenings that keep us in the game mentally. K is for keys that we can use to unlock the next door of opportunity. E is explorations that let us journey where we've never been before. And S is statements about our development and progress. I'm taking a picture of it. It's awesome. So good. Okay. A few years ago, as I spoke at an event attended by more than 50,000 people, I shared something written by Portia Nelson. It has been one of the most requested pieces by people who have ever heard me speak. It's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. Better than almost anything else, it describes the process of exiting the failure freeway. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. Ooh, that's good. The only way to exit the failure freeway and see the new territory of achievement is to take full responsibility for yourself and your mistakes. Michael Korda, editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster, declared, "Success on any major scale requires you to accept responsibility. In the final analysis, the one quality that all successful people have is the ability to take on responsibility." Like I need to read that again. In the final analysis, the one quality that all successful people have is the ability to take on responsibility. It's good. Your most important ability, responsibility. The fight to take responsibility occurs within, and rarely does talent, intelligence, or opportunity make the difference in whether a person wins that battle. It calls for character. That's why Stuart B. Johnson remarked, "Our business in life is not to get ahead of others, but to get ahead of ourselves, to break our own records, to outstrip our yesterday by our today." You can tell when people develop deeper character, accept responsibility for themselves, and begin learning from their failures. It really shows in their performance. For example, I observed that in Chris Chandler of the NFL's Atlanta I observed that in Chris Chandler of the NFL's Atlanta Falcons after I moved to Georgia. Chandler is a quarterback who had a history of floating from team to team. Prior to his employment with Atlanta, he had played for 5 teams in 9 years, and he had never excelled. But everything started to change for him in Phoenix. That's where he met Jerry Rome. "I was at a point where I really didn't care anymore," says Chandler, about that part of his career. His view of the league affected his willingness to take full responsibility for his lack of success. Oh, right. "I thought the NFL was just totally political and I was ready to quit. Jerry brought back my competitiveness and he taught me how to play. He made it fun again." How did Rome accomplish that? He told Chandler the truth. "I told him after the season that he had a lot of ability, but he was uncoachable," said Rome, "and I offered to work with him." At first, Chandler resisted. He expected everyone else to adjust to his style and ability, but then he changed his mind and accepted Rome's offer. With help, hard work, and a new willingness to change himself rather than expecting others to change, Chandler has become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, taking his team to the Super Bowl in 1989. This is so true. This is hard. It's hard. So applicable to our business. so applicable to our business. Sometimes if I mumble, you cannot hear me. I gotta make sure I talk loud. Okay, another road to fame. Not everyone learns the lesson of accepting responsibility for her actions. One of the most unusual stories I've ever encountered about someone on the failure freeway is that of Rosie Ruiz. Back in 1980, she was the first woman to cross the finish line of the Boston Marathon with the third fastest woman's time ever. But from the moment that she finished the race, people were suspicious of her victory. The person most shocked was Jacqueline Garou. Though not favored to win the race, Garou had been training to run it for 3 years, and during the course of the race, she had pulled ahead of all the other women. It appeared that she was going to win, but about a mile from the finish line, another woman suddenly appeared running ahead of her, and that other woman, Ruiz, finished before her and was declared the women's winner. Immediately there was a stir. I knew something was fishy, said men's winner Bill Rogers. He said that Ruiz had too much body fat and not enough muscle to be a distance runner. On top of that, at the finish line, she didn't appear fatigued, wasn't sweating heavily, and displayed unfamiliarity with running terminology while being interviewed. The race officials were suspicious and they began to investigate. They found that Ruiz had qualified for the Boston Marathon by obtaining a fraudulent qualifying finish for the New York Marathon. They surmised that in the Boston race, Ruiz had jumped into a group of runners a mile from the finish line, never suspecting that she was actually ahead of all the other women. The Boston Athletic Association disqualified her, and a week later they awarded Garou the winner's medal. Still on the freeway. What's most amazing is that even years later, Ruiz still hadn't learned from her mistake. At a 10-kilometer race in Miami, Garou saw Ruiz and tried to talk to her to clear the air. Garou recounted, I said, why did you do that in Boston? And she said, oh, I did run it. So there's no way you're going to have a conversation with her. 2 years after her appearance in the Boston Marathon, Ruiz was arrested and charged with stealing cash and checks from her employer. A year later, she was convicted for trying to sell 2 kilos of cocaine to an undercover police officer. As Sir Josiah Stamp said, it is easy to dodge our responsibilities, but we cannot dodge the consequences of our responsibilities. So true. I don't know what Rosie Ruiz is doing today. Her past activities remind me of the bumper sticker I've seen that says, don't follow me, I'm lost. Back then, Ruiz was doing a lot of moving, but she wasn't getting anywhere. Let's hope she finally found the exit off the failure freeway. Your fifth step to failing forward. Change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. Take a hard look at a very recent failure that you have considered not to be your fault. Look for anything negative in the failure that you should claim responsibility for, then own it. Once you begin thinking in terms of what is your responsibility, you will be able to change. In changing your mind, the way you think about failure is the next step to failing forward and the subject of the next part of the book. All right, so here's the recap. Steps to failing forward. 1. Realize there's one major difference between average people and achieving people. They fail a lot. Number 2, learn a new definition of failure. 3, remove the you from failure. 4, take action and reduce your fear. And 5, change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. These are so good. Okay, looks like the next part is, do you mind changing your mind? That's chapter 6. No matter what happens to you, failure is an inside job. All right, well done for today. You guys got some value out of it. I certainly, it's like, I feel like I'm failing a lot lately, and this is like really speaking to my heart because I need to like take a good look in the mirror and tell myself and give myself responsibility for what I'm doing or what I'm not doing and decide what I can do and move forward. Love you guys.